Hi everyone, my name's Aidan Joseph, and today I'm going to be giving you a tutorial on how to shoot hyperlapse videos like this. So first of all, what is a hyperlapse? So a hyperlapse, or a moving time lapse, is this technique in photography where you shoot a series of photographs which are spaced out over a longer period of time than if you were shooting a video, and then you condense these photographs down into individual frames of a video and you get this kind of time-bending effect. So what's special about a hyperlapse is that you get this same kind of shooting through time effect, but you also include movement. So this is a micro adjustment to the positioning of the camera in between each photograph, and then when you string all those photos together, you create this nice, smooth, consistent movement. All you'll need is a camera. It doesn't matter what kind of camera. You can use a mobile phone, you can use a DSLR, whatever you've got. And what you'll also need is some editing software. You can do this on most editing softwares. The ones that I'm going to use today are Adobe Lightroom to edit the photographs before I send them in to be video edited, and then Premiere Pro, which will just help us string together that footage and then stabilize it to mitigate any of the wobbles that are going to happen through the handheld photography. So normally with a hyperlapse or a time lapse, you would want to be shooting on a tripod, and this is just to keep the shots steady, and yeah, you'll need to stabilize less in post. But if you're kind of a bit time pressured, maybe you don't have a tripod, or if you just want to shoot a hyperlapse for fun, you can achieve this handheld and get away with it with quite impressive results. So the good thing about this location is we've got a lot of space that we can move about in, and also if you look at the ground, we've got these tiles on the floor, and the tiles on the floor will be a good guideline for me to follow so I can make sure I'm going in a straight line, and that will help stop the time lapse from having any wobble. It will keep it smooth and it'll look great in post-production. Right, so as for camera setup, I'm going with the Canon 16-35, and the reason being is that this is a wide angle lens. As the lens is so wide, when we go to stabilize it in post, what's going to happen is some of that footage will be cropped in. So the wider the lens, the more space we're going to have to play around with, and yeah, we're not going to lose so much of the image. So when it comes down to camera settings, whatever camera you're using, whether it's a phone or a DSLR, you want to be shooting in manual. That's manual everything. Shutter speed, white balance, ISO, aperture, keep it all manual and keep it all consistent. So you want to crank up your aperture to quite a high f-stop. This is going to get as much of the frame in focus as possible, and you can play about with different settings, but I've found that this works best for me. Particularly as you're taking lots of steps, you don't want to be refocusing every single shot. It would just be so time consuming. So this saves you time when you're actually shooting it. As for shutter speed, if you keep your shutter speed lower, then you get a little bit of motion blur in each frame. Particularly if you've got cars or people, you get this lovely blurry effect in the movement. So you want to always be capturing your images in RAW. This will allow you to edit the photos and get the most out of them, get the highest dynamic range. RAW images have so much more detail and information packed into them than JPEGs. It's just going to elevate the quality of the hyperlapse as an end result. If your camera doesn't shoot RAW, that's fine. This works totally fine with JPEGs as well, but if you can, you should always be shooting in RAW. Now, if your camera has grids or guidelines that you can turn on, you're going to want to turn them on your viewfinder, pick a spot on your grid, whether it's the upper third, the dead center, wherever it is, and you're going to line that up specifically on the same spot for every image. For my City Hall hyperlapse, I lined it up with the top of the fourth pillar from the right. Now, my camera has a inbuilt digital spirit level, so if you've got one of these, you're going to want to turn it on. This is just going to allow you to always level out and keep your shots horizontal, as that's another thing that can send your hyperlapse out of whack, is if each photo is kind of moving slightly like this between each shot, and that wobble can be too much for warp stabilizer to handle sometimes. If you can't do that, try and just line it up on the horizon or any sort of level surface in the frame that you can line up the bottom of or the top of your frame with, and this will help you to keep your shots horizontal and level. As for how many photos should you take, you're going to want to think in terms of the frame rate of your output video. So for this video, we're shooting for 25 frames per second, and in that circumstance, for every 25 shots, photographs, you're going to be output with a second of hyperlapse footage. So for the City Hall hyperlapse, I think I shot about 75, so that would output about 3 seconds of hyperlapse footage. Right, so basically what I'm going to want to do is line up with the camera, point it at my focal point, take a shot, and then I'm going to want to move in a consistent direction, and I want to take the same distance of steps in between each shot, and I'm also going to want to pace out those shots at the same amount of time. So for example, if I were to line up to take a shot, then I'd take 1 step forward like so, and then I'd go to take the next shot, and then I'd continue to do this over and over for the duration of the time lapse. The speed at which the time lapse moves depends on how big of a distance you're taking in between each shot. So if I wanted to zoom really quickly through a space, I'd take maybe 2 to 3 steps in between each shot instead of 1 small one. But if you want it to be slow and smooth, equally you'd just take a shorter amount of steps and move a shorter distance in between each shot. So preferably you want to shoot it on a day that has a much more interesting texture to the sky. Unfortunately today it's really cloudy and overcast, but it's still going to look interesting anyway. You can kind of work in the grade to make your hyperlapse suit the feel and the atmosphere. Right, so first of all we're going to want to head into Lightroom Classic. So here I've already imported my photos, but what you want to do is go File, Import Photos and Videos, find where you have yours saved. Mine are here in this hard drive, City Hall Hyperlapse. And essentially what I've done here is I started to take a hyperlapse in these images here. I didn't quite like the framing, so I started again, and to let myself know that, I put my hand in front of the lens just like this. And yeah, that just lets me know that I'm restarting and where to import from the next photos and the rest of the series. So I unticked this one, selected the rest, and then clicked import. So once you have your photographs in, what you're going to want to do is edit one of these and then copy and paste the effects to the rest of the photographs. Right, so I think I've got this image about where I want it to be. I've tried to make it a bit more colourful, a bit more contrasty. Yeah, and just I've brought down the highlights in the sky to give you a bit more texture in the clouds. Even though we haven't got very much, we'll try and work with what we've got basically. What we're going to want to do is copy and paste those settings to the rest of the images in our sequence. So to do this, we'll click on our image, right click on it, go to Develop Settings, Copy Settings. Here are all the checkboxes of all the different settings that you can adjust or copy over. That's fine, we'll click Copy. And then what you want to do is select the next image in your sequence, hold Shift, select to the end, right click, Develop Settings, and Paste Settings. Now I was just playing about with this first image, didn't really like the way it was going, so I'll develop settings and paste to that image as well. Now what we're going to want to do is export all of these raw images as JPEGs. So if we hit Ctrl A to select all our photographs, go File, Export, choose a specific folder that you want to export your images to. I've created this folder called City Hall JPEG Exports. Just go down and make sure your quality is set to 100 and hit export. This might take a minute or two just for the files to export, but once that's done, you're going to want to head over to Premiere Pro. So if we open up Premiere, we'll make a new project and we'll call this City Hall Hyperlapse. Right, so now what we want to do is import those images into Premiere Pro. Now what you can do is import every individual image, or you can import all of the images together as an image sequence. So to do that, we go right click, we hit import, find our images where we have them saved. Now you're going to want to select the first one in your sequence, and here are all of the images. And then we're going to want to check this little box over here on the bottom left, which says image sequence. The same goes for Mac. I'm not sure where on the screen it is, but you'll want to check this just here. Hit open. And then we get this single image here, which has imported at 25 frames per second. What we'll do is we'll create a new sequence. Want that to be 25 frames per second. I like to use this digital SLR 1080p 25 frames per second preset. We'll call this City Hall Hyperlapse. Now we'll drag this over into our sequence, and as you can see, it's zoomed in a little bit, and that's because the resolution of our photographs is greater than 1920 by 1080. So that's an easy fix. All we're going to want to do is open up our effects control tab and then scale this down until it's the right size. So in the case of my camera, that's going to be 46. Now if we have a quick scrub through, we can see that there is some shake, but you do get some interesting movement in the clouds. It looks quite cool. And yeah, you can see my cameraman Joe, who was shooting some BTS, snuck into the frame a few times, I think. Now we're not done, even though this looks quite cool. What we're going to do next is apply a warp stabilizer effect. To do that, we're going to want to open up our effects tab, search for warp stabilizer. Now if we carry that over onto our video, go to effects control. Now the settings in warp stabilizer, if you have it cranked up too high, it's just not going to look so great. So the settings I like to use are smooth motion, and then we select position, scale and rotation for the method. Set this smoothness down. This is what you're going to want to adjust when you get your end result, and if you're not happy with it, you're going to have to dial it down a little bit or hit it up a few digits. So we'll start with 8, and then if you hit the down arrow on advanced and click detailed analysis. Right, so warp stabilizer's done its magic, and then as you can see, we've got a pretty beautiful hyperlapse going on here. Yeah, that looks fantastic. I'm really happy with that. Now, devastatingly, I've just noticed that there are some hairs on the footage. I thought I was careful to clean my lens, but obviously not. As you can see here and here, there are some blemishes on the image. When shooting anything, always remember to clean your sensors and your lens. That is a rookie error. Bit embarrassed about that, but for the purpose of this tutorial, you get a pretty cool effect anyway. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It was a lot of fun to make. If you like this video, please give the page a share, go visit our website, check out more of our content, and yeah, thanks very much. See you in the next one.